What's happening, YouTube? It's Simon 466 Cards, and today we're going to talk about a part of this interview between Neo Cards and Comics and Nat Turner, head of collectors, which owns PSA. This part of the interview surprised me, it surprised Neo, and it also surprised Nat, and it is where they talk about graders notes and how that was received by a hobby focus group. So I'm going to play the clip. It'll be about a minute or two long, and then we'll discuss why it was surprising to the three of us and why it actually makes sense. So let me just play this for you here.
One of the things that you guys did differently with Graders Notes, which I don't like, is you guys made the choice to keep them private. What was because in comics they're very public.
We
I'll
made
be curious to see how you guys kind of handle that.
That was a technical. I mean, honestly, there wasn't a business decision about that. It was really just it's like one more thing our engineering team has to do, on the third page. I mean, it's not to say they'll forever be private. I will tell you though, we had in our focus groups a lot of people prefer them private. Like if a card has a flaw, they don't want someone to see it on eBay and then look it up and be like, "Oh, I'm not bidding now." It's got to, even though the grade is right there on the label, they viewed it as could only hurt the value of the card they just got graded. So that surprised me, but that is something that came out of our research before we did it. So
that surprises me too, but it could just be.
So there you go. They did a focus group, and surprising to both me, to Neo, and to Nat, the focus group said they don't want to share the graders' notes publicly. They want to keep it private. And so I, as someone who owns PSA slabs, obviously I think it makes sense to make the graders' notes public so that we can all have the information, full transparency, full information about a slab, right? And why it got the grade that it did. And I believe that's why Nat and Neo here believe the same. Let's just be transparent in the hobby about why something is graded the way it is, and everybody is on equal footing. And so that's why the three of us are all surprised why the focus group would not agree with that, and in fact say they want to keep things private. So let's explain why that is, because whenever I don't understand something or whenever I'm confused, I try to figure out and piece together why I don't agree or why I don't understand. And I think I figured out why. So let's go through the journey of a raw card getting graded. All right. So let's say there is an 86 Fleer Jordan that is owned by a submitter that is raw. That submitter sends it to PSA. The PSA grades the card and it comes back, whatever grade this is. I think it's a 5 or a 6. And then after it's graded, the original submitter obviously still owns it. He sells it to someone else who then gets to own it for a while, and then down the road someone else will buy it from the second owner and that person owns it for a while, and on down the journey of a card it goes, moving on and on, buying, selling, trading, that whole life cycle of a graded card. And so we've heard the submitter, they don't want to share information with potential buyers, right? The submitter doesn't want potential second owners and third owners to know it, because they think that they will use that information against them when selling the card or when buying the card, depending on which person's viewpoint you're looking at. And that's why the submitter doesn't want to share any information, in this case graders notes, that might affect negatively the sales price. Okay? And on the flip side, this is where I believe myself, Neo, and Nat are on. We want to just be transparent about the card as much as possible. I want to know why something got the grade that it did with the grader's notes, and so on and so forth. And similarly, the third owner of the card, downstream from the original submitter, also is the same as second owner. Let's be transparent about why something got the grade that it did. Tell me what the grader's notes say. And so that's the stalemate that we're at here, right? The submitter and the second owner and the third owner want different things, because the submitter is like, I am going to have the information for graders notes. I don't want to share it because it might be used against me and affect my sales price. And so why did this focus group say they didn't want to share? Well, these submitters are also PSA customers. And a focus group run by PSA, can we guess who was in the focus group? It's going to obviously be the submitters who are paying PSA customers, while people who submit less often, so for example, I've submitted maybe 5-10 cards to PSA. I think it's actually less than 5. But I buy cards that are graded by PSA. There is no way that PSA would ever interview me as part of this focus group, right? PSA is going to interview their bigger customers that submit to them most often, which means that they're going to bias more to being in this camp versus in this camp. Because if you are someone who sends in a bunch of cards to get graded, and that is part of how you make money and how you exist in the hobby, and PSA, they know you as a large submitter, whether you're bulk, whether you're a group submitter, or whether you just are, this is, grade to flip, or flip to grade, or whatever the phrase is. And that's how you exist in the hobby. They're much more likely to interview you. If you're sending them hundreds, thousands of cards a year, they're going to interview you to get your thoughts on graders notes and how public they should be. Whereas someone like myself or others who submit, anywhere from 1 to 50 or so cards a year, they're probably not going to interview us as part of this focus group because we're not their big customers. We're not their major customers. And so that's why the focus group said what they said. It's because they're not actually representing the hobby. They're representing people who make money by submitting cards to PSA. And so obviously they're like, don't share this information. It doesn't help my sales. And that's how I make money and make my living. Whereas the hobby as a whole, I think if you pulled the hobby as a whole and not just PSA VIP customers, they would say, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Share the graders notes publicly. Everybody can see them if you click on the cert number. But that's not who is in the focus group. The focus group isn't a hobby focus group. It is a PSA large customer focus group. And so that's why it doesn't represent the interests of the hobby. It just represents the interests of someone who submits a lot to PSA, which is why they say don't share the graders notes, because it doesn't help them. Even though I would argue, and I think Neo and Nat would agree, that sharing them publicly would be better for the hobby as a whole, because more transparency is better for everyone involved. So that is the explanation of both why myself, Nat, and Neo were confused, because we're thinking holistically about this as a hobby, for the hobby, whereas the focus group is a very narrow group of customers who probably make their living and make money by submitting to PSA and don't benefit from having public graders notes. So that's the video, and that's the explanation. Let me know in the comments section down below whether this makes sense to you, or maybe there's another reason, but I think this explains pretty well why the focus group came back the way it did. As we sometimes do on the channel, we're going to preview the next video. Next time, we're going to talk about college cards. College cards don't have a lot of hobby value. Short term, medium term, long term, right? They start low and then they go lower. And so you hear all the time, college cards or collegiate cards or draft pick cards in the case of basketball and football, they don't have value because they're using college uniforms, college logos, and nobody wants to own them for that reason. And I'm here to say that might be part of it, but is there more? Is that statement totally true, or is it only partially true, or is it false? And we'll talk about that next time. So stay tuned for that. That should be coming out on Sunday, because if you don't know, my videos come out on Wednesday and Sunday at 7 a.m. Eastern time. So set your timers or listen as you make and eat breakfast in the morning on Wednesday and Sunday. Thank you as always for listening and watching, and I'll talk to you all soon. Cheers.